Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Spiritual Mind Healing service. And today's topic is what science of mind and spirit teaches about death. And so today, before we go on to the meat of the matter, as usual, we are going to open with a treatment, an affirmative prayer. So let us, wherever we are, be still and bring God's presence. And so we're knowing that God, the one omnipresent source, all infinite source of all that there is. We're one with this source as today, as we unfold within the spiritual healing service, we're knowing the divine presence of God is here, operating through our thoughts, our expression. We're knowing that we leave this healing mind service enriched and touched through the sharing and expressions of the one spirit as right action, as divine purpose. And as I speak today and as you share, we're knowing that we take away all aspects that we're inspired to act, to share, to evolve, and that this outpicturing of this experience during this session enriches our life. And so we're knowing that this is so, and release it to love, mind, for action, knowing that this is so, and so it is. And so once again, welcome to those people who are here on the Zoom meeting platform, and for those who are online, on YouTube, and in the virtual space, welcome. And so we're going to go into a few minutes and moments of silence. And so wherever you are, just sit still. If you're driving, just have a quiet moment as we go into this silence. Take a deep breath and we enter into this silence. And take a deep breath in as we release from this silence and come out of this silence. So welcome once again. I'm Tamu Davidson, your Science of Mind practitioner and host for today's Spiritual Mind Healing Service. And so today we're going to talk about what Science of Mind and Spirit teaches about death, or essentially making that transition. And so this topic was selected as me personally. I've had the loss of a loved one most recently, and I have been interacting and interfacing with many friends and persons who have lost a loved one over the past year, over the past week, over the past 3 weeks, month. And so also we know of many popular and prominent leaders who have passed, persons of influence over the past year. And so this topic has been talked about many times in terms of death and what death means. And so it's important because death is an inevitable outcome of life, but what is our perspective from the science of mind? How do we perceive death? What does death mean to us? Now, within the context of the science of mind philosophy, it teaches that all living things are connected and there's a universal spirit which unites everything. We also do healing through affirmative prayers, and that practitioners are trained to do. But despite these affirmative prayers, death is an inevitable cycle of life. But within the science of mind, we see death not as termination or as the end of everything. In science of mind, death is seen as a transition to a new phase of existence rather than an end. And in the perspective of Ernest Holmes, it's really a transition to another form. So this form, which we see as a body, it's our spirit, we transition. So it's important from our perspective that death is seen not as a finality. So Ernest Holmes taught that essence of an individual continues to exist in the spiritual realm after the physical death form. And he also discussed concepts about immortality, reincarnation as an evolutionary process of the soul. So here we have our participants on, and I want to hear from you. What are your perspectives about this transition? This perspective that death is not the end, it's really a transition, an evolution of where we're at from a science of mind perspectives. Have you had any of that experience that may be an aha moment? Or do you have another concept to extrapolate on this? I'd love to hear from my participants here in the room and for those online on YouTube. Any perspectives would you like to share? Do we believe, embrace this concept of death being a transition and not a finality? No? So if we look at death, and one of the things that when persons are actually making that transition, one of the things that we do is looking at using affirmative prayer, which is also spiritual mind treatment, as a practice to, in the context of death, is to really have the focus being on a spiritual understanding that life is eternal and the soul continues beyond the physical body. So when somebody is facing this perspective of end of life or making a transition, or a relative may have lost a relative, a friend, a loved one, affirmative prayer may be used to support their transition. And so we use affirmative prayer for healing, but also to support us letting go or understanding or dealing with a transition that we may be facing ourselves. And affirmation is centered around affirming the internal nature of the soul, so that the soul moves beyond death, not this physical form. And we talk about the body as form, spirit, the mind, as part of that consciousness. So one of the things we look at the internal spirit. So in affirmative prayer, we acknowledge that the eternal nature of the individual spirit or soul. We emphasize that the person lives beyond the physical body. And then we also highlight the whole matter of harmony with the divine. So In the state of transition, in our affirmative prayer, we emphasize the need for greater harmony with the divine or universal intelligence. So the affirmations are centered around peace, love, the sense of oneness with the spiritual essence of the universe. We also look at gratitude and acceptance. So expressions of gratitude for the person's life and experience. Also acceptance that life and death are in a natural cycle of life. And so in our affirmative prayer, we seek to align the mind in terms of getting to a space of peace and acceptance. And one of the things when someone passes, a loved one passes for someone, one of the things that I usually do, or with giving the routine condolences, is to surround them with peace and love, and usually peace. And my own experience with the passing of my father most recently, and leading up to that process, was the acceptance of this being a transition, and this being my father making his transition, and that being a natural cycle of life. But I didn't just get there. Certainly, the science of mind as a principle helps me to understand and to reconcile with the concept of death. It doesn't mean that you don't miss your loved one. It doesn't mean you don't grieve about it, but you know this form, this state that you see him in terms of his physical body. That's just his body. That's not the spirit and essence of the person. And so that helped with the process of grieving, and also finding my center of peace and remembering his oneness with the spirit. So through the affirmative prayer, also we guide the process in terms of ensuring to express gratitude for the person's life, so acceptance and being grateful. The prayers also are directed towards comforting and supporting the individual and their loved ones during this period. Also recognizing that when we work with different individuals, they're at different stages of the grieving process, and understanding or accepting this transition. And so the focus of the affirmative prayer may be quite different, depending on the individual. However, the emphasis is really acknowledging the internal aspect of the individual, and the individual beyond, acknowledging the individual beyond the individual's physical appearance. So one of the things in terms of the role of consciousness in the dying process and making that in transition is acceptance and peace, and really insights into the inner peace and acceptance during the transition from life to death. And so it's a process and that everyone has to work through. So at this time, I would like anyone who's comfortable with sharing any of their experiences with either having a loved one transition, or having to speak with a friend about transitioning and acceptance. What are your thoughts about the concept? Even though we're all steeped in truth, it may be still hard for us to fully come to realization and recognizing that death is a natural cycle of life, and that this is just the physical form, and person lives beyond in their consciousness. Anyone wants to share in that experience? Do I want to call? And anyone wants to share their experience and their perspective?
Hi, Tamara, I have my hand up.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I did not see you. My apologies.
No problem.
Go ahead. Carol?
Good evening, everyone. Well, I mean, I've just a couple of weeks ago, I heard that my ex-husband passed away, but it just since the last few months, it's like everything on rapid. Everybody I know is checking out, and when I think about death, it's not only death of a physical body, not only death of a person, but there are many things that we grieve. It can be a loss of something besides the loss of a person. I mean, you can grieve the loss of your youth. You can grieve the loss of income. You can grieve the loss of a pet. The process of grieving is the same. The intensity may be different, but grief is grief. And we grieve at the loss of anything that we feel is significant in our experience. I mean, I personally feel that life is for living, and life only knows how to live. So when we speak about the eternality of life, I don't see that as death being the other side of this experience. It's simply life in another way. We keep on living. Might not be in this physical form, but life lives. So that's what life does. So we're done.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. And so if Essence, reconfirm this transition and your perspective, how did you reach to that reconciliation? Or do you sometimes have a tug of war between those concepts? So we may internally know it verbally, but when it actually happens to us,
yeah, I wouldn't call it a tug of war, and grief is not a linear process. You can, and also just because you're grieving doesn't mean you're going to walk around with a long face 24/7. Life continues, and you just allow the process to take place, recognizing that it is a process, and however long it takes is however long it takes. It could take 1 year, it could take 10 years, and that's not important. What is important is not to deny the process, to allow the process to unfold in the way that it needs to. And each person will have a different experience of grief. Each person will have a different response to the passing of a loved one, the loss of something. Each person's response is going to be different.
Yes. And so that's an excellent point. So, in our perspective as practitioners, our approach will be different in terms of our affirmative prayer on where that person is within the grieving process related to death. And as you rightly said, death doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It could be a pet, could be a loved one. It could be the loss of a job, which evokes the same type of feeling or emotion. Here we're talking about the loss of a pet or loss of someone. But what is important is acceptance of this process and finding that sense of peace. Thank you so much for sharing, Carol. Anyone else would like to share? We know this topic can evoke spontaneous emotion, sometimes just discussing the process, but I'd like to hear other perspectives. Thank you. Very personal topic. Okay. Well, Ernest Holmes really didn't talk a lot about death in the perspective of it being final, but more spoke to death from the perspective of death being more on immortality. So seeing really the body as just the physical form. And there are many different perspectives around death in different religions. Some religions beliefs, and in many, they believe in quickly burying the physical form of either in a very simple way, the way you came in, the way you come out. So they bury the body within a 3-day short turnaround time. Some persons do the cremation as well. So in quite a few religions, they don't see the physical form as a final and acknowledge the spirit as living on and transitioning on. But usually a lot of the issue of grief and trying to cope and deal with death lies with the persons who are in fact left behind, trying to grieve or to get through this process, and really acknowledging and coming to terms with death being just a transition to a whole new phase of existence rather than just the end of that individual. I would like anyone to share what has there been anything in their lives that would affirm this philosophy that it's just the body, the form of the individual, but they hold to or have experienced the fact that the spiritual transition of the person, that the person continues to live on. Anyone wants to share that experience? And do we have any sharing on YouTube? Right as I've heard the group, I have to call out. Sandy, my assistant, do you have anything probably want to add on this? Thank you.
I was about to go on YouTube to see who was there. The Science of Mind teaching has more or less made death, the idea of death, a matter of fact for me. That doesn't make me feel any different or any less sadness in the transition of someone. You know, and so I think of my own transition. I think of when, as much as I understand it intellectually, when I was sick last month and really coughing out my gut string, I was wondering, you know, what would happen if I can't breathe? If I stop breathing, what would, you know, that would be death, you know, and what would that mean for me? What that would that mean for Kevin? What would that mean for, you know, the job I have to do next week? And, you know, so those kinds of human thoughts came to my mind. But at the end of the day, it's like it all won't matter anymore and life will go on. So I just take it one day at a time and know that when it's time, it's time. And I just, you know, say moving right along, so to speak. All right, I'm just gonna jump onto YouTube and see who is there.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Carol Charlton is on YouTube. And
Yeah.
she's saying is that the feeling of separation is what hurts and perhaps never really heals. And then Nadine is saying that the grief of losing her eyes and being angry, and then losing the nearest one to me. She's asking you to pray for her from the feeling of intense depression.
Okay. So we remember that as soon as we go to the prayers. Very, very good point. The feeling of separation. So yes. So, I also, again, share the same feeling with Sandy. I think Science of Mind, growing up in the Science of Mind prepared me for death. Didn't make me aloof, the emotions, but helped me to cope in losing my father recently and prepared me very well. In fact, I was surprised how well prepared I was for that process. Having being in more recent times, losing someone that close. So, but separation, yes, indeed, the grief around separation, a lot is about the separation. So you'll know that the person, their form, physical form, is not here. They've moved in a spiritual onto their spiritual form in terms of their transition. And what I do outside of in dealing with that is to create or maintain certain very small connections, things that connect to the spiritual essence of that person in terms of any quotes or thoughts or ideas that they may have instilled, and linking that and connecting in that way to the individual to maintain that lack of separation, or seeing, in terms of them having made that transition. But again, Nadine confirmed losing your sight is like death itself, or dying. That experience for her, and in terms of her grieving. So I think, we have varied mechanisms of ways of coping. Is there anyone else who wants to share on this death and dying? So for persons who are not within the science of mind, may have a different perspective on this transition. So we encourage persons making that transition to understand it as just as a natural cycle of life. And that's something that even my personal mother expressed and shared from a very young age. So already in preparation for this, it happened many years in my teen years as I went along, that sort of perspective around death. And it can also be an opportunity for your own personal growth as well, and making this transition. So at this time, if there's no one else who would like to share, I would just like to, just to end this section, reminding us that in coping with grief and loss in science of mind, one of the tools we do use is healing through affirmative prayer, and supporting and encouraging individuals to accept the loss as a natural cycle of life, but also remembering the essence that this transition, this death, is really a transition, whether it's the death of personal lost one, loss of a job, loss of sight. And it's really a transition to a new phase of existence, rather than an end, a spiritual growth and awakening. And, I recall my own father, as he made his transition, the level of peace and bliss that I saw on his face as he made that transition, which I, I'm so willing to share it. It brought me my own inner peace, and solidified this whole concept of death being a new phase rather than an end. And so through this process, we, it's important to support individuals where they're at in terms of their own perspectives with respect to death, and so that they can find that inner peace. So at this time, we have
Reverend Sonia,
for treatment. Yes, go ahead.
Reverend Sonia says it feels like a dream in which I'm awake and observing with curiosity.
Okay, that's a very important point. a dream, and observing with curiosity. And that's another phase of dealing with it in initial stages. So, in that dream state, it's almost as if it has not occurred, and you're still reconciling with this new phase of existence with your loved one. But yes, that is certainly part of that phase, dream state. Okay, so at this time we are going to take a request for treatment. We do have one request
One for
from
Nadine.
Nadine, yes,
Pray
and
for,
that
um,
that
the challenge is intense depression. So the prayer would be for peace.
yeah, for peace or for light, yes.
Yes,
Okay,
or light, because depression
yes,
suggests darkness.
yes. Okay, so this is an affirmative prayer for Nadine for light. And so we're knowing as we bring God's presence, this presence of light that illuminates, and it's one with Nadine. This light illuminates through her thoughts, her experience. This light guides her in all aspects of her life. This light activates all her cells, all her thinking, brings her joy through this light. This light brings peace through this light that embodies her thoughts, her actions, her decisions, her experience with her loved ones. We're knowing she's surrounded in this light of God. And that as she goes through her journey through life, this light of God shines the open route, elevating her to the highest experience of her own self, of joy, of all that life has to offer. So we're knowing that Nadine, as a perfect child, an individual, an expression of God, that all is well. And we release this thought to love, mind for action, knowing that this is so. Okay. Any other treatment requests?
Nothing else in YouTube. I'm not request for health and love from Dawn. Request
Okay.
for love.
All right. So we do the affirmative prayer for love, and then we'll do it for health. So this is an affirmative prayer for love for Dawn. We're knowing that God, the one presence, the divine, omnipresent, omniscient expression of love, God operates through Dawn as a love. Dawn is one with its source of love. And we're knowing that love is all that Dawn experiences. Love is what outpictures from Dawn in all her relationships. Relationships, albeit with her loved ones, her family, her friends, in the workplace, with pets or animals, anyone whom she comes in contact with, feels this love that generates through all her dealings with every single relationship, every single aspect and sphere of her life. And through this abundance of love, Dawn steps into this world and experience and feels this energy of love. as she is the perfect expression of God, love, through each and every molecule and atom and experience today. And so we release Sister Law Mind for action, knowing that this is so and so it is.
Mhm.
And so we do another affirmative prayer for Dawn
Thank you.
for health. And so we're knowing that God is the perfect expression of all that there is and health. And Dawn, as the expression of God outpictured, is an outpicturing of health. We're knowing that any experience, she is in good health, all aspects. There's no ill health. Mind, the body, the spirit, and physical health, the financial and emotional health are all operating at the center of the Spirit of God outpictured. Every ailment is healed. All aspects, her physical form, her mental form, are healed and operate in harmony as they should. And so we're knowing for perfect health for Dawn is her experience. And we release Sister Law of Mind for action, knowing that this is so and so it is.
So it is.
Thank you very much.
You are most welcome, Dawn. And do we have another treatment?
Let's see. Any more? No more on, nothing on YouTube and nothing on Zoom in the chat.
Nothing on Zoom on the chat. Okay. All right. Do we want to do our reminders at this time?
Just bring that up. Okay, just a few reminders. Let me just bring this up. Mhm. Okay, always just know that there are lots of classes available to support you on your spiritual growth, on your path for spiritual growth. So just, give us a call at the office or, and to hear what is going now so that you can sign up to one of these classes. Wow. Once Upon a Watch Night. This is a play that is, we are taking a part of a benefit night on Friday, the 8th of March. So some of us have tickets. We only got 50 tickets. So, check out your tickets very quickly because they're going fast. So that's the 8th of March for our Temple of Light evening at the Little Theatre with Basil Dawkins play Once Upon a Watch Night. Of course, Sunday morning, we have our service. So we invite you to tune in either online for a live stream or join us in person at the Temple of Light. And of course, next Tuesday, we have another spiritual mind healing service. So we invite you to check that out as well. Before we go into that, there are two more things I want to bring to your attention. One is the book launch that we are having on Sunday of this week at 4 p.m. at the Temple of Light. There are two authors. One is Reverend Michelle. Can you remember the name of the other author? I don't have the flyer up on this. There's another author who is also launching her book. And Reverend Michelle's two books will be launched as well. So there's going to be we'll share tea and snacks at the event. So that's this Sunday at the Temple of Light at 4 p.m. Another reminder is about Lifeline on the 29th of February, Thursday, last Thursday in the month. And we'll have our special guest, Reverend Jacqueline Edwards, who is founder of the CSL Diversity Inclusion
Commission.
Thank you so for that, Van. So and she will be interviewed by Reverend Michelle on Thursday, February 29. Anything that we have forgotten to share?
Okay.
Think
No,
that's it.
I think we mentioned the prayer support, and our next we will be here next week at this time at 6
Talked about
p.m.
that.
Right.
Not sure who's speaking next week.
I will have to check on the title. I'm sure this will be announced for next week as to who will be speaking.
So just know that whoever is speaking is going to be always
Awesome.
experience. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So friends, if you feel moved to support our ministry, we invite you to donate at our donate.templeoflightcsl.org, and to thank you for making, we thank you for your generosity and for helping to be a beacon of light for the world. Okay, so as you are about to hit that donate button, just put your hand on your hearts and just say together.
Lovingly I give, joyfully I receive. Be thou fruitful, increase and multiply. Bless, prosper, and enrich everyone whom you touch, and replenish all of my financial affairs. Thank you, Father. And so it is.
Awesome. And so we will share together the prayer of our center.
So let us repeat this. The Temple of Light, Center for Spiritual Living, is a sacred field embodying our spiritual community from which the Christ, peace, love, and joy emanate to touch, to heal, to bless, to prosper, and to liberate everyone who comes in contact with it in any way. The light of the Christ illuminates us, our center, and our environment. Our spiritual community is filled with and surrounded by the presence of God, and God is growing from strength to strength. The power of God expands our consciousness of truth, guiding us ceaselessly along the paths of wisdom, spiritual growth, unfoldment, and attainment. We are blessed, and to God be the honor and glory forever. And so it is.
And Jamaica.
So the prayer of Jamaica, the radiant light of God's love, is now flowing through us and from us to everything and everyone it touches. The eternal light of God's love now completely fills and covers and surrounds our island Jamaica. The glowing intensity of the light of God's love now interpenetrates and awakens with the hearts and minds of our countrymen and women, the truths of life with set free. The light of God's love is growing and glowing in intensity in the hearts and minds of mankind everywhere. Love, health, harmony, goodwill, peace, uprightness, integrity, joy, prosperity, kindness, and our oneness under God are now established, and so it is. Thank you. And so I just like to remind us that death, as we spoke about it, is a transition, not a termination. And that death is a transition to a new phase of existence rather than the end. And so embracing this cycle of life, we're knowing that our loved ones have made the transition, and we too will make that transition. and knowing that this is the form body. So let us surround ourselves with peace and love for all the persons who have lost someone, or that person has made a transition and has moved on to a different form. And let us also look at our own transition and continue on this spiritual journey, preparing for this next phase of life. Thank you all for listening, and namaste.